Okay. Thank you so much for joining this interview. I sincerely appreciate your time. As we get started, I just wanted to ask if you could briefly introduce yourself, share your personal, academic, and professional background.
Of course, I would like to start by thanking you for inviting me to this platform, and I'm happy to be here. So, to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm a Turkish qualified lawyer. I have studied in Istanbul University. I have worked there in different law firms for 7 years nearly. And after that, I have decided to come to the US at Georgetown Law to do an LLM here. And I have recently completed my LLM program and graduated. And now I'm currently in DC and continue to be here till the summer.
Wonderful. So, to perhaps start at the beginning of your journey, could you share what made you pursue law as an endeavor in the first place?
Yes, actually, before I decided to pursue studying law, for a long time I wanted to be an architect. Ever since I graduated from the elementary school, like in the middle school, and then the first half of high school, that was my plan because I liked drawing and I liked working on designs, structures. But then when I was in high school, I also learned about, so to say, humanities, the other more abstract fields. And law took my interest because I realized the reason why I wanted to become an architect, the reason why I'm telling you this is because, again, I liked working on systems. But then I realized law is also a way of working on the systems, but I might say with a bigger impact. It studies how a society should work and what should be the rules that are governing our daily lives. So I saw a parallel there, and I also realized if I worked on law, it could give me more intellectual flexibility. It's a challenging field, but it's also a rewarding field, and it helps you grow in a way that you want to grow, so to
Hmm.
say.
That makes
So
sense.
that's why I decided to pursue law.
All right. So architecture, then law, and now, and you sort of departed from your original legal, space, let's call it. You worked in Turkey and then you decided to come to the US. What made you make that decision?
Well, it was mainly related to the field that I wanted to work. I worked in arbitration, and in the and there are two reasons. First of all, is the field that I want to work, and I want to come to the US and specifically to Georgetown because the arbitration program here is a very strong program because of its location in DC. Georgetown has a lot of adjunct faculty members, like from like practitioners, worldwide, like world-class practitioners who are coming here to teach in their fields, which is a huge opportunity. And second reason was I wanted to learn about common law. Like Turkey, we have the civil law system, and I'm coming from a civil law background. But there are like two major systems in the world, so to say. The first one is the civil law, and the second one is the common law system. And I wanted to also come to an institution where I can get exposure to the second major system in the world.
Makes sense. So you went from a civil law system to a common law system, a sort of Turkish educational space to an English speaking one. What was that transition like? Was it sort of, do those differences encapsulate the differences that you experienced in your transition, or would you say there were different things that you experienced as well?
I would say definitely there are some things that I did not anticipate. Some things we knew, like some tradition, like even when you're learning law, you would hear about the common law system and how it is different from civil law, where it is the emphasis more on the courts when creating the law. But when I came here in the constitutional law class that I took in the first semester, like one thing the professor told me what really struck, like he said, the judge should not make law. If the judge is making the law, then he's making a mistake. That was a very surprising thing to hear from a common law, even a judge, a common law judge, to say that because like when you come from a civil law background, you hear like the court is where the law is made in the common law systems. But here, when you hear a judge say that, it was a very interesting thing. And it also made me question what I should understand when you say law in a common law school. Because
Mhm.
we have this notion of law, what is like it's a codified rule which is applied, interpreted by the court. And like that's what we understand by law. It's basically practice. But here, uh, again, the law, you would hear that, the judge shouldn't make law, but when you also look at the contract law system here, the rules come from the interpretation of the courts. Actually, sometimes not even just interpretation, but they have to come with a solution to a practical problem. And that is the law. They understand that is the law. So I think it also it makes you think about the concepts that you take for granted and rethink and appreciate the different approaches. And I think it's a rewarding experience. It gives you a lot to think about.
Mhm. And how was that sort of adaptation to I mean, completely different conceptual system for you? Was it a smooth transition? You sort of pointed out a moment that stood out to you, but was it sort of an aha moment and that clicked, or do you think it was a longer term transition to a new playing field?
I'd say it was cautionary. Like my first experience was I realized I should be cautious when I'm approaching the legal education here,
Mhm.
because after like getting a legal education and practicing for such a number of years, like we learn to think in a certain way. That's what the legal education is all about. It's not about teaching law. It's about teaching you to think in a certain way and
Mhm.
letting you know how to find what you need, like a rule or whatever. And when you get that notion, it like, you cannot help it. After a while, you actually start to think in a certain way. Uh, but coming from one legal system, I'm more adapt to that notion. But here, I realized I should actually try to look at it from a like, different perspective. And actually, sometimes, even in certain classes I took here, I like treat it as if I'm learning the law from the scratch, because I thought that it would be easier to understand the way of thinking here by letting my previous thinking, the way of thinking go and start from a clean slate. And then I try to appreciate, obviously you can escape it when you learn it from a different concept here. You'll, in my mind, compare it to the similar concept we have back in our legal system. And again, I come to appreciate that even though like these different systems like they follow different paths, most of the time they come to similar conclusions.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think the beauty is understanding the differences and the reason why there are differences in the way of thinking in coming to those conclusions.
Mhm. So, sort of following up on that, a lot of these conversations have raised ideas of you think differently, but you also communicate differently. So, I'd wonder if when you transition between those systems, obviously there's the linguistic change, but if you realized how, legal thinkers or professionals conjured those new ideas, approached problems, and came up with different sort of interpretations, but did they also communicate them differently, or do you think that it was pretty consistent between the two settings that you experienced?
I'd say the linguistic difference is definitely an important factor. So let's start with that. Like coming from a Turkish background, I think in Turkish legal system, when you look at the court decisions, our judges love using sentences with only one verb and like different elements like this, puts it has been found, and then you can create like a paragraph with like 20, 30 different lines.
Mhm.
Uh, Here, I would say that when you think that way, again, it's even hard to understand it in Turkish, and then you understand it and you try to, when you're, first of all, I was practicing, I had a lot of exposure to like foreign like parties, like the clients or counterparties, where you had to communicate in legal terms in English to people who are coming from different legal backgrounds. So that was already a challenge back then, because you have to figure out which term to use in order to better explain the Turkish legal notion that you're trying to explain. So there is always a difference, and the language plays a lot of a huge part. But I would say when I came to appreciate here, first of all, I think the English, because of its, again, the linguistic characters, uh, it forces you to use shorter sentences in order to make your thoughts go across to the listener or the reader. Whereas again, that's the language differentiation. But what I definitely learned again how the usage of language is important, not just from a legal point of view, but also like speaking to the native speakers, native lawyers, how they use certain sentences and how they formulate their thoughts. So it was interesting to also like observe that differences, not just as a Turkish lawyer trying to explain a Turkish legal rule to an English speaker, but also like seeing how like English lawyers using their own language to practice their own craft, so to say.
Mhm. And as you observed this different style of writing, how do you think your own style evolved? I mean, do you still find traces of wanting to write paragraph long sentences when you write in English, or do you think you adapted well to the sort of short, poignant sentences of English?
Well, I was trying to avoid doing that even when I was practicing in Turkey, because nobody wants to read a sentence, like a paragraph long sentence. But again, when I was here, I realized, like for example, some of our professors would say, the best sentence is a sentence that is like less than 8 words. Like this word economy, so to say. I think I realized when I'm writing in legal English, I started to even put more emphasis on that. So when I'm, for example, writing a paper, I would try to use shorter sentences, uh, like try to formulate my thoughts in a way that I can uh, convey using shorter sentences. So I think it was definitely, I would say, very good experience for me to learn thinking uh, in this way.
We spoke about writing as a format of communicating different sort of legal thoughts, and then obviously we have the spoken side of that. And I'd wonder if there was a difference in the way that you, as a professional, were expected to speak in Turkey, in Turkish, within that legal system, versus as now an American trained lawyer, if there are different expectations of speaking in how you communicate with judges, with clients, with other, lawyers or other professionals. If the differences in writing might imply some differences in speaking as well, and how you've experienced those differences.
Again, I think the difference, the I would say I realized that very early on even when I was practicing in Turkey, using right terminology, especially when talking to a foreign lawyer, because like when we say, for example, indemnity, uh, it might Turkish lawyers like think of it as tazminat. Just give some example, but it's not actually the same thing, because like when you are trying to explain to uh, like a foreign lawyer, especially like a common law lawyer, the concept of like tazminat using the words like indemnity, they might misunderstand it. Instead, you have to use like either compensation, or if you're talking about zarar, like damages, for example, it might be the better like equivalent of the idea that you're trying to convey. And that's one important thing. And again, I think it's something that every lawyer, even like it's practicing in Turkey, who is working in cross-border matters, can understand and appreciate very early on when they start to work. But I would say one nuance that would be more apparent when in the US is some cultural differences, not necessarily legal, but how, for example, when you're talking to a more senior lawyer, how you should tone. Because like I would say in Turkey, because of our culture, we are more structured, so to say, or more formal, I think is a better word when we're talking to more, and not just senior lawyers, but more senior people. But I would say in the US, like at least on the face value, it's not as formal as Turkey. So you can actually be more like, for example, using the first name when you're talking to some people, like whereas in Turkey would use honorifics. Otherwise, it might come off as rude sometimes, but here, not necessarily so. So those kind of nuances are, I would say, more apparent when, like, when compared to practicing in Turkey, is like instead of like coming here and interacting with lawyers here.
Mhm. So I think that's a pretty beautiful transition from the more mechanics of the side of law to the cultural aspect. And I'd be curious, sort of extrapolating what you just said about formality and hierarchy within legal systems, if there might be a difference in how lawyers and legal professionals are perceived between the two countries. I mean, as in their place in society, their place in culture, their relationship to their country, their government, the people, etc. Do you find any differences between those sort of perspectives?
Um, I would say a lawyer as a profession would generally be perceived as I wouldn't I wouldn't want to say a revered, but like a celebrated profession. Like if you wanted to become a lawyer, like if you tell your parents, like you're going to be becoming a lawyer, your parents would be happy. And then if you're going to, for example, if you take a test and you mention that you're a lawyer, and then the the impression or the reaction that you would get would be the same in Turkey and here. Because I think it's because of the lawyers' place in the society and their role in the justice system specifically. So in that case, I wouldn't say they're necessarily like the fact that it is like the reaction that you got from a person, it would get the same reaction. So it would be the same. But what I would say is how the lawyers are being perceived. Like again, like, it might be more technical, but I think more interesting nuance is the position of the lawyer within the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you know what I mean. Like, just to give you an example, like in the civil law systems generally, the lawyer should not like prepare a witness before a hearing. It might be considered even a like a, like a like that might subject a lawyer to discipline, and the witness testimony might be disregarded by the court because it would be like considered tampered. Whereas in the US, it is perceived as lawyer's duty to prepare a witness before the trial because that's how they view the best way to get to the truth of the matter. Like in one way, you want to see the pure views of the witness, but here you want to actually make sure that witness is prepared to give a testimony, so this would be more effective. So this kind of differences puts lawyers in the different places, I would say, within the legal system, and it's also again, it's a one small example, but I think it demonstrates how the lawyer is viewed, and I think because of that, like because of the lawyers changing, uh, let's say, interactions and the specific duties within the legal system, that might change how you are perceived by your counterparties within the system, like by the judge, for example, or by the governmental officials when you're interacting.
Interesting. So I'd be curious now that you've been a professional and a student in two different systems as to how you might perceive yourself. I mean, do you see yourself fitting one role in one system and the other in the other, or has your view of yourself as a lawyer changed of your responsibilities? Perhaps to go off the example that you said, like, would you prime a witness based on which system you're in, or would you still have sort of a rejection of we need to get to the pure truth?
I would say that first of all, of course, I am not in this position to say that I'm a common law lawyer. It's a process, but from I can only talk about my observations. Uh, I I think it heavily depends on your practice area. These differences I'm talking about would mainly relate to like litigation. I think this is the most stark differences. But in advisory, I think it's not that different,
Mhm.
uh, so to say, because I think the Turkish corporate practice is more influenced by this like sort of like big law culture in the US and in the UK. So like your interactions in like in an advisory position, it's not as different as you would expect. So like in a law firm environment in Turkey, like if you're working in a corporate law firm, I don't think if lawyer firm there would be it's not as different the practice, the way you practice your responsibilities uh, when you compare the corporate law environment in Turkey and the corporate law environment here.
Interesting. So as we sort of, wrap up this comparative cultural aspect, I'd be curious if you had any more sort of thoughts that you don't think we've covered about how culture impacts your work that you might want to share. I'd be curious if, we've missed anything on how, again, ideas of hierarchy, of responsibility, of collaboration, formality, any of these ideas that you've sort of received from your own upbringing in Turkey might impact your practice or your learning or your experiences today. If you think we've missed anything, if not, we can move on, of course.
One thing I can just point out would be I think where the culture plays a big part is not within the law firm environment, but your interactions externally, like uh, the interactions with the clients specifically, like interacting with Turkish clients and interacting with clients from different jurisdictions. I think that's where like culture differences show themselves and how their expectations are from a lawyer, how they expect you to communicate regarding their ongoing matters. That would be the one big area.
Makes sense. All right. So, as we sort of approach the end of our conversation, I'd be curious to hear about your sort of reflections on your experience. And I would want to see first looking forward, as you've gone through this education now, and you recently graduated from your program. And I'd be curious as to what you hope to contribute, where you sort of see yourself using your professional experience and your educational background, and what you might want to do with your, new, let's say, armory of education in approaching the legal profession.
Well, as for my reflections, I have been here for nearly a year now in DC for my LLM program, and I feel like I've learned a lot, a great deal about like legal system here, and not just that, but also I think LLM is a great opportunity to learn about uh, different backgrounds, different cultures as well, because here, like we had, I think, close to 400 people from all over the world, and throughout the year, you get to interact with some of the like great legal minds coming from everywhere. So I think it's from that aspect, it was a rewarding experience not only to learn about the US or the common law system, but legal thinking from all different jurisdictions. So I'm
Mhm.
very happy about that. I'm glad that I had that experience. And looking forward, I certainly would hope to put these new perspective, skills, and knowledge that I learned here uh, to use either in my private practice or again through maybe some more collaborative effort back in Turkey, because I think there are like some like I think the most important thing is again coming back to the one earlier point we discussed. Legal education is not about learning the law per se, but still about learning a way of thinking. And I think the biggest contribution of this year was learning a different way of thinking, a different perspective. And I think my hope would be to put this perspective that I got here to a better use, either back in Turkey or in some other way. So to help develop the legal system again in Turkey, whether it's through, maybe if I were to inspire another person to, come here and do this LLM and get this experience or another way, that would be my hope.
Mhm. And as you reflect on where you were, where you are, where you're going, what advice would you give to that other person who might be considering coming to the US and learning about a new way of thinking about the law? What have you sort of learned from your experience that you'd want to share?
I think one, certainly keeping an open mind,
Mhm.
uh, and be trying to leave some of the uh, like again like some legal notions, being able to leave that behind and like treating this as an experience where you can start learning from a new, especially with regards to uh, like legal education, legal classes like relate to the U.S. law. I must say, like LLM is not just about like learning common law because it was a specialized program where I also had like arbitration classes, and then that's familiar. But some classes where you take in order to, for example, qualify to sit for the bar here, like some fundamental legal classes. I think keeping an open mind there is definitely helpful. And second, like having an objective and acting for it, uh, whether it would be like if someone wants an academic career afterwards or like furthering the professional career, because like it's this year, like it looks long, but it goes by so fast in reality. So having a game plan even before coming here definitely helps. And third, also not forgetting to enjoy in the time here. I think it's also important, like trying to get to know people and have experiences. Uh, like if it's in the US or another country, it could also be that, like trying to learn the country, talking to the people there. I think it also grows us not only as a lawyer but also as a person. And I would also say that growing as a person actually makes one a better lawyer.
Hmm. Makes sense. And as we wrap up, I have sort of two questions that I'd want. So just sort of the context for these questions is imagine someone's hearing this conversation, say 2,000 years in the future, and these are the snippets that they get to take away. Is there a particular story, experience, or insight that you might want to share that stands out as especially meaningful to your journey as a lawyer across two systems, two languages, two cultures? That's the first. So let's start with that.
I mean, I think I touched upon some of those insights and experiences already. I think especially like in the last question, well, having, learning about these new experiences, like learning about people like from different backgrounds. I think that's a very rewarding experience, and that would be the biggest insight that I can think of.
And then the second question for this time capsule would be, what would you want, in one or two sentences, a future lawyer or a future global lawyer to take away from your experience? If you had sort of one key takeaway, one key lesson, one key strategy, or one key, uh, just one thing that they take away as the most helpful, as the most important, what would that thing be?
Well, I would say back in our day, the law was practiced by humans. So I think that would be the biggest snippet. Just joking aside, I think still like definitely think that there will be like AI
Hmm.
lawyers in the future, but again, the lawyers will not be completely replaced because I think law as a profession serves human conscience, and if uh, as long as there's human conscience, I think there will be human lawyers. And if AI manages to replace human conscience, I think we have bigger problems than finding a job in the legal field.
Makes sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that you participated in this interview. So if you don't have anything other burning to share, I'm just going to quickly stop the recording.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.